Alrighty then. Here we are, Defiance, Book 2 in an Alaskan Apocalypse. This is Chapter 1, Scene 2, continuing reading, and Defiance, the sequel to Defiant, an Alaskan Apocalypse. Let's pick up where we left off yesterday. The parking lot was packed, and every seat inside the homeless kitchen was filled. I walked in and dodged past the short line to help myself to the employee-only area behind the serving station. Dorothy called to me from the checkout. I wondered if you were ever going to show up again. She grabbed me and hugged me before I could answer the jibe. I have been relegated to the most unfun job in Fairbanks. She waved me off before leaning close. It's getting worse, she whispered. I know. We're moving as much as we can into town, but new loads are snatched up immediately since people are stockpiling, as if they're expecting society to melt down once again. That makes it look worse than it is, and people end up here because there's nothing left at the stores, which means it is worse, when it should be getting better. Human nature is making it worse, not the government. You can't blame people for being people, especially with what they just went through. I need to buy time for things to settle, for spring planting to sprout, and people to see hope. Dorothy smiled once more, the matriarch of the hungry and homeless. I'll keep feeding them if you keep making sure we have food to serve. I had rented a 28-foot moving truck each week and sent it to Anchorage to fill up on groceries and bring it back to the kitchen. Doug was the key in making that happen and keeping Dorothy and her customers fed. The patrons watched me. Some glared. I could only feel like I failed them. Hardworking people shouldn't go hungry. They shouldn't be here, but thanks to a place like this, they could get something to eat. I excused myself and went into the kitchen where I found Laura on the stove. Mays doing knife tricks at the prep station, and his girlfriend, Conchita, loading the dishwasher. I kissed my wife on the cheek while hugging her from behind, leaving her hands free to maintain her mastery over the stove. I'll order more spices with the next load. I'd purchased bulk quantities of what Laura used to add flavor to the variety of food served. Not all of the staples were the highest quality. A little spice had gone a long way to giving the needy a decent-tasting meal. I'll ask Doug to take care of it. You have enough to worry about. Laura smiled over her shoulder. Be careful with those hands. You don't want to get a grease burn. I realized I still held her around the waist, and my exposed skin was dangerously close to the business end of the stovetop. I let go and backed away. I'll see you home later. Are you going to stop by the office on your way? I will, she sounded confident. There was enough parking and not enough traffic into the city hall that she'd be able to. There was enough parking and not enough traffic into city hall that she'd be able to find parking. Be able to find a spot. She drove the Prius. That was my dad's. He'd passed away and left me everything because there was nobody else. I gave his fishing gear to his fishing buddies. I blew out a long breath and stared at the floor. I hadn't been given time to grieve, and his absence washed over me when I wasn't expecting it. Like now, no matter how hard I tried or how much I worked, I couldn't change people's perceptions that things were worse. I felt like I failed. They were getting better, but I needed more time so they could see it for themselves. At least I wasn't sending the police to take their guns away. We'd rescinded that law as a first order of business, along with the law eliminating the need for a warrant under the auspices of conducting a health and safety check of each property. Just because the government taxed our property didn't mean the government had a right to enter. Fourth Amendment protected us from that. Second Amendment protected our weapons. My predecessors had used the health and safety law to ignore the former to abuse the latter. I was still angry that they had taken my moose rifle, a stainless steel Marlin 4570. I liked that weapon. I decided it was time to order another. If I could find a federal firearms license holder who was still in business. The previous administration had done a number on them too, taking all their weapons without recourse. It was going to be my responsibility to pay those claims, but the city's budget was in tatters, and the money spent on reestablishing infrastructure. Tax receipts had fallen off because the people were rebelling against property taxes. The school system was in crisis because we were running out of money to pay the employees. The previous administration had hastened the end of civilized society. It seemed like I had to rebuild that from scratch. I was ill-equipped for the politics involved. So many favors were needed from people who made it their job to drag their feet so they could ask for a favor in return at a time and place of their choosing. The man who was supposed to be mayor, one Clint Carstairs, should have been in that office, and I should be on the outside throwing rocks at his glass house. If ifs and ands were pots and pans. I returned out front where the people were dining. A group stopped their hushed conversation and turned around to give me their harshest looks. I held their gaze. Dorothy stormed over to them. "Who do you think paid for what you're eating?" she said out loud. She said loud enough for everyone to hear. The dining area quieted. She lowered her voice, yet her voice carried. "He paid out of his pocket. He's fighting to fix things so you don't have to come in here. But until then, he's giving everything he has to support you. Eat and keep your judgment to yourself until you know the truth. Thank him." She stabbed her pointer finger at the one she determined was the leader of the group. "You heard me." "Thanks, Mr. Mayor," he muttered. Others in the dining area clapped. Made me feel like garbage. I waved and hurried for the exit. In my truck, I was happy that a song was playing. Best I Can from Queensryche. It was appropriate. Sometimes your best wasn't good enough, and that was the hardest thing to come to grips with. I found that I couldn't stomach it. I always believed that I could win if I worked hard at the right things. I was proving myself wrong. No wonder politicians were a different breed that I couldn't understand. They could tell the population the sun was shining during downpour, and the people would believe it. I needed a queen of public relations who could spin reality into a chocolatey muffin with frosting and sprinkles. I put the truck in gear and drove to the fast food chicken place. Prices were high, 3 times what they'd been before the previous administration had taken over. The owners promised to bring prices down when demand dropped because restaurants that were still in business couldn't supply the city's needs. I wanted to drive to the prison so I could punch people in the face. I could punch those people in the face. "Look what you did to my city," I shouted at the sky. "And a side of coleslaw, please," I added as an afterthought. Beatrice would take what I brought and accept it with a smile, even if it wasn't exactly what she ordered. She was more kind than most people. I wondered what my schedule would look like for the afternoon. I'm sure I wouldn't have a break from the second I returned until I hid my face and ran for the exit 2 hours after the end of a normal workday. End of chapter 1. All right. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you keep listening. We'll pick up tomorrow with a little bit more. Peace, fellow humans.